I'm KT McFarland. President Obama's strategy to degrade and defeat ISIS has brought a lot of criticism from all corners of the intelligence and the military worlds. But what happens if it's successful? What happens if ISIS is pushed up against the wall? What happens if we do degrade and defeat them and potentially destroy them? What do they do next? Joining me to talk about this is Jack Devine. He's the author of Good Hunting, an American Spy Master's Story. He's the former head of the CIA's Directorate of Operations. He's now president of the Arkin Group. So he's probably top spy in America. So Jack, what do you think? What happens to ISIS if we are successful and their back is up against the wall?
You know, I think, Katie, it's a question of how we define successful. I actually think we will do great damage to our air effort. I don't think there'll be anything moving after a couple weeks. In other words, in terms of armored vehicles, depots, anything that moves, I think, will no longer be around. Getting an army to go nose to nose with a different story. But if they're out, they're not going to be out in formations. If they are, they'll be decimated. My guess is they're going to pull back into population centers. And then it's a question of digging them out. But the idea of an Islamic State will be, largely diminished. I think the question is what happens when they're in that state. How do they go about pushing back on us? And I think that's where terrorism emerges as our greatest threat. Probably in the region, the combat region, probably trying to focus in on our own facilities in the region. Would certainly not roll out an attack in the United States.
So in other words, if we are successful in the Middle East in degrading and destroying ISIS, it may increase the likelihood that there are attacks against American facilities or interests in the region and also in the homeland?
Yeah, that had to be a going-in consideration. But frankly, I don't know how we could just stand back and allow Americans to be headed and basically tweak our nose and expect to hold the prestige and power that is needed to keep balance in the world. I don't think there was an alternative. But that's the price. I think the biggest price will be one of
an increased likelihood of attack on the homeland. All right, well, what about ISIS partnering with other groups? It seems like every couple of weeks there's yet another jihadist terrorist group threatening our interests. We have the Al-Nusra Front, we have Al-Qaeda, we have ISIS, and then there are even more that range anywhere from Libya to Iraq to Syria to Yemen. What happens if they all get together and come after us?
Well, I have a lot of sympathy for the policymakers in trying to sort through the end game on this. I think what we're looking at is a Sunni-Shia struggle. It's the overarching problem here. So when we look at those various groups, the old story of, war has, unusual bedfellows. So my sense is, the fighting among themselves will not be relevant in comparison to what we will be doing to them. If, however, I was a competitor within the Sunni group, I might lay back and just hope that ISIS gets really pounded and, my group would then emerge to a front position. So, I think from my perspective it is, how do we deal with the Sunni-Shia thing? Not so much worried about the individual groups inside of the Sunnis in Syria. I ran a narcotics program at one point, and one of the things you have to worry about, your success sometimes leads to another problem. You take out the kingpin, and then you have 15 people to deal with. And I think to some degree that's what happened. We really hammered Al-Qaeda, and as a result you have this splintering effect. Everyone's running to ISIS now. When we start bombing, when they start, drones are taking them out while they're having a cup of tea, some of that bravado is going to disappear and some of the enthusiasm. So I think when they face American air power, we'll have to have another evaluation of just how much bravado they have. But there's a huge role for intelligence here. In other words, once they get into those population centers, it's going to be harder to target them.
All right, well, you said a war makes strange bedfellows. Okay, so we used to be fighting Al-Qaeda. Now we're fighting ISIS. And if Al-Qaeda is fighting ISIS, is the enemy of my enemy my new friend? do you conceive of a situation where we're partnering with Al-Qaeda, where we're partnering with Iran, we're partnering with Assad?
They're both our vicious enemies. In fact, there's some in the administration who believe that Al-Qaeda and the special unit inside of Al-Qaeda that has experience in bomb making represents a greater terrorist threat. I don't know how to weight that. I would just simply say they're both vicious enemies that need to be destroyed, and we need to hammer them as hard as we can. I don't think that there's an opportunity here where you just hammer one. I think we have to be keeping the throttle on the pedal on all of these groups.
All right, well, what about if they're all fighting each other and as well as fighting us, what if we just step back? I mean, George Friedman of Stratfor has said, what if we just step back and let them all go at each other, bleed each other dry, and then whatever enemies we may face are greatly diminished because they've done the job, not us?
I think we all feel like that once in a while, but they're not going to let us do that. In other words, it's not going to be that simple that they fight it out and don't drag us into it. They keep beheading people. Remember, the old Marine song, from the shores of Tripoli to the halls of Montezuma. Tripoli was about basically pirates kidnapping and our sailors off the coast of Tripoli. We just, as a powerful nation, you can't take our citizens and savagely behead them and expect us to stand by. It's not going to happen.
Were they doing this deliberately to lure us in?
Well, we look at Saddam Hussein and what happened to weapons of mass destruction, and his reluctance to step up and say, "Look, I don't have any. Come take a look." Sometimes it's very hard to get into the culture and mind of your enemy, and that there's a lot of theories out there that they wanted to provoke us. I do believe there is a sentiment in their group that they will prevail because of their religious mission, if you will. And I think we have to face that down and show them that it isn't that simple. And I just think there's a viciousness about this group, and that they are bloodmongers, and I think that has appeal within some segment of the population. And they're going to be a group of thugs and going to put the wrappings of religion around, when I think I took great comfort in seeing that a number of the moderate Islamic leaders are starting to step up and point out that this has nothing to do with the Quran and the Muslim faith, and it's actually and the antithesis of it.
Well, thank you very much. We've been talking to Jack Devine. He's the author of Good Hunting, The Spy Master's Tale. He's the president of the Arkin Group and the former head, Directorate of Operations at the CIA. In other words, top spy. That's it for DEF CON 3. Thank you.